Okay, so I talked about this a little bit on the other channel, but it's actually been confirmed and reported by Shams that Jayson Tatum will be making his season debut against the Dallas Mavericks tonight, which is a big time addition for the Boston Celtics. I mean, listen, this team is 41-21. That is second in the Eastern Conference. They have the fourth best record in basketball as of recording this, and they have gotten contributions from left and right on their roster. We'll talk about Jaylen Brown here in just a minute, but it hasn't been just Brown, right? You got Nehemiah Queta, who's been absolutely phenomenal for them this year. He's putting up averages of 9.9 points, 8.2 rebounds, and 1.3 blocks while completing an absurdly efficient 64.3% from the field. Peyton Pritchard has really continued his ascent, has become a truly reliable starter, averaging a career high 16.8 points per game on pretty solid efficiency himself at 46%, although the 3-point percentage is down a bit, which was to be expected as the defenses are now forced to key in on him a bit more. Derek White continues to be a defensive pest. They traded for Nikola Vucevic, and while you can argue that that hasn't gone as smooth as some Boston fans would like it to, it did add a real solid element to their offense, considering that they didn't have the floor spacing that they once had out of the five. We know that Vucevic is a reliable spacer at that position, something that they had missed since Al Horford departed. And speaking of the roster and Horford, there was a ton of change this past offseason that left many thinking that this would essentially be a gap year, including myself. Now, again, like I mentioned on the other channel the other day, I expected them to be a playoff caliber team. I expected them to be a top 6 team with all the talent still left on the roster. I mean, after all, Jaylen Brown is a finals MVP. He has that on his resume. But at the end of the day, considering some of the changes in the rest of the Eastern Conference, considering the injury to Tatum, I didn't think that they would be as good as they have been this year. That much is true. And speaking of some of that change, right? Because there was a ton of change this year or this past offseason for the Boston Celtics. No more Al Horford. I think there's more to that story, as Horford himself has kind of been hinting at. KP was moved. No more Kristaps Porzingis, right? Drew Holiday was moved for Anthony Simons. Tatum, like I mentioned, was lost essentially for the bulk of the season in a year that we thought he'd be gone all year for. And then Jaylen Brown, obviously, he has been a top 5 MVP candidate, and he's fully embraced being the number 1 option over there in Beantown, in which a lot of people were already saying before the season began that he was fully capable of doing that, but he has essentially cemented that. And right, he is out of Jayson Tatum's shadow this season. But I do have some questions here. Now, obviously, there's a lot of caveats to take into consideration, as Brown has morphed into this extremely ball-dominant centerpiece. And in that regard, right, he is leading his position group in usage this season at 36.9%. That is insane. That is astronomical, honestly. But what does this look like when Tatum takes the floor? Is it a 1A, 1B, like a LeBron, Kyrie type of thing? Or do they go back to what they have always been over there and it just be Tatum is this true number 1 and Brown is this number 2? Or I guess you could view them as 1A, 1B prior to this, with Tatum being that 1A. But does Brown take a backseat, or does Tatum? Or do they just continue to try and coexist as they had before? Now, I think that what is most likely to occur is that Tatum obviously is going to take things very slowly, and they'll walk him along. He'll be on this minutes restriction, and that will, by virtue of that occurring, allow Brown to continue functioning as their true number 1 this season. But even if there's a bit of a struggle in terms of fit or touches or anything else out there on that court earlier on in his return, the second seeded team in the East just got that much scarier due to this addition. Now, for my own Cleveland Cavaliers, I have often argued that it's not the Detroit Pistons that really give me the most cause for concern. It's not the New York Knicks that put the fear of God into me or anything like that. It's the Boston Celtics in terms of actually complicated matchups, stylistic matchups that may not go as well for Cleveland as it would against some of these other teams. So you add a Tatum back into that roster, which is the 4th best record in the East, or 4th best record overall and the 2nd best record in the East. That's a huge huge addition. It's not like they traded for him either. He's just coming back from injury. Now, assuming that Tatum stays on the court, I think that's the one big thing here and doesn't suffer any additional injuries. But I mean, you just think about that. That is a scary thought for the rest of the East. And you can honestly make a case that they might actually be the favorites to represent the East, even ahead of teams like Cleveland and Detroit and New York, if he comes back looking at least 75 to 80% of himself. But time will tell on that one. We just gotta kind of see what the good Lord has in store for Jayson Tatum in that regard. But all I know is you got to give this Boston Celtics team a lot of credit for their ability to not only stay afloat, but to legitimately succeed without Tatum being available. I mean, you just look at where they rank in a lot of these relevant categories that we love to talk about. They're second in offensive rating at 119.9. They're seventh in defensive rating at 111.9. They're third in three-pointers made per game at 15.4, while being ninth in overall three-point percentage at 36.4%. So they're not just chucking up a bunch of shots and hoping that some make. Like, they're legitimately top 10 in both of those categories. They're sixth in rebounding at 46.2. And we know that Tatum has been one of their best rebounders over the last couple of seasons. They're eighth in blocks at 5.4, which the Myers Cada has a lot to do with, obviously. And then they're third in plus minus as a team at 7.3 per game, which is huge. And you would not have thought all of this possible with all of these different things that occurred in the playoffs for them and in the offseason, losing some of these major pieces that were key cogs on their finals team, right? But above all, Jayson Tatum is a huge piece to get back, and I'll be very interested, objectively speaking, to see how much that improves the Boston Celtics, who are already a dangerous team in their own right without him. And I think if this stretch of basketball has proven anything, it's that Jaylen Brown is fully capable of functioning as a number one. I don't know how much longer that duo is going to be together, but I'll tell you what, Jaylen Brown has been phenomenal this year. You got to give him his credit.